this is like the presentation about the DLUX thing or the project. I'm Endre Karlson from HP Cloud Services. So DLUX is like, call it like a hobby project for me at the moment. So there is let's see if this thing does work. So what is DLUX? It's basically a UI which is decoupled from the main controller. So if you wonder why we did that, there is this little thing. So it all looks nice when you're looking at it in like the browser, but once you actually start looking under what it's using, it's a bit terrible. So this is the JSON which is used to write out the subnets, I think, if I remember correctly, in the current UI. And this is actually what it's like in the northbound one. And I mean, if you look at the topology ones or some other ones of it, it's like even worse. So they're actually defining all the tables and everything with the JSON that the UI uses. So me and some other guys like Madhu wanted to try to like rip out the UI from the existing one and like decouple it. Like if you know Openstack, it has like a stateless UI, which just consumes all the different API services. So the name was pretty funky. It was I think it was Dave Tucker or from HP or Madhu, which came up with the name. It was like, because we had a previous name which was called VUX, and it was pretty tragical because it was like, it means like old man or old guy in French. So that was pretty embarrassing when we came to the TSC meeting. So anyways, the thing we're wanting to do is kind of like to do the same thing which they were doing in Openstack, to try to just don't do any custom data thing within the controller and just use the northbound APIs. So basically keep the controller having all the smarts with all the data and just having like a stupid stateless UI. And if you need to do like any custom JSON thing from multiple API calls, you can do it like in the UI app instead. And the motivation for this is, for example, if you have a cluster and you want to do like a graphing thing for all of the different controllers in the cluster, you can have like the dashboard do all the API calls instead of having the controller do it. So the story so far is we started with AngularJS, if you're familiar with that. It's a JavaScript library for making single-page apps by Google. They're using it in like Google Compute Engine, like the dashboard for that. It's used in YouTube for PlayStation 3 for one and others. So we started this project back in October doing just AngularJS and HTML. So the concept is then you take like a lot of JS files and HTML files and you kind of like build it into an app which is served up to the client. And then that just uses cross-origin stuff to the controller. But we kind of found out that that didn't work too well because it wasn't easy to plug in new stuff. So say you want to have like, you have a dashboard and you want to add like another dashboard, that isn't too easy compared to like with the stuff we're doing now, which is kind of like built for that by the Openstack team. So we kind of did this little thing instead, which is taking OpenStack's Horizon and basically using Angular as well for some pages, since it's pretty neat for that. I'll give you a show of that later. And that's pretty what that means. So, did I miss some points? No. We have a working kind of like controller thing. Not a controller, but a UI. So this is pretty much what it looks at like today. So you have, if you're familiar with OpenStack, you have like a project dashboard, which is like what you see as the tenant or the user of OpenStack. So we did one called networking or network, which is basically it has like connections, nodes. Connections is going to be like the management connections, whilst nodes is more like, so you have a connection, but the connection can have like multiple nodes because they can be like OpenFlow nodes or different bridges within the connection. So if you kind of like dive deeper into there, you can see the details like you do in OpenStack. You can go and see OVSDB. So we can go like look up the different tables and see like the rows. If it works, that's always a challenge. Yeah, there we go. It's just frozen. I thought, yeah, there it is. It's just resolution messing up my screen at the moment. So there you can actually see the OVSDB contents of that table, which is like the rows. You can even see, so this is for Open vSwitch. You can like add others as well. There is like another different type of node you have. So that's OVSDB integration. And we have for nodes as well, like a detail page. So you click in, it's kind of like drilling down into what's going on, looking at it. There's the connections. There is a layer 3 PAM or a PAM as well within that dashboard for like configuring the subnets or static routes, which is like feature parity stuff with the existing UI. So that's pretty much how that works. We also, so Dave made like a Neutron integration for OpenStack, so you can actually drill down and see the different bits which is from Neutron. So there's the networks, so you can click into that. Then you got all the different ports, the subnets and all that from Neutron as well. So and this is actually just data which we're fetching from the Northbound APIs, like in the controller. There is no kind of like custom thing being done in the controller at the moment. And I was going to add also, so the controller has, if you know Jalokia, it's like JMX to HTTP JSON bridge in the controller, which is running on port 9000. But I realized that the controller I'm consuming doesn't have that port open at the moment because I'm using Dave's controller for this, since he has like a working thing at the moment. Yeah.
Are you able to show the relationship in between neutron ports and tabs, OVSDB tabs?
Ports, yeah, we're gonna try to do that later on. You can add that to the Trello, and I guess me and Dave will take a swing at adding it. It shouldn't be too hard to do though, so we're even, considering adding like buttons to the OVSDB thing, so you can look around in OVSDB and have like buttons to go to the detail pages or something. So, so what is like small ideas for the future at the moment? So we've been looking at Keystone integration for like authentication and all that, since it has user management via LDAP or even a separate database. It has groups, it has roles, domains, and a lot of other funky stuff. They're also going to support multiple different kinds of authentication types in the future, I think. We're wanting to add like WebSockets to gain more like interactivity with the controllers. And then you can do stuff like if you get like something changes in the network and you try to like reflect that in the UI. Add more like service provider oriented dashboards, like for stuff like routing, or I'm not like a service provider guy. I work usually with like enterprise stuff. So there's the topology. We have a guy from Siena, I think, which is working on that. He's just waiting to get like allowance from the lawyers to submit it back. And there is branding also. I mean, the current branding or the style of the UI was done by Dave in like 10 minutes or something. So, yeah.
What are you planning to use to show the topology? What type of technology are you trying to use to show the topology?
At the moment, we're using, I don't know what the Siena guy was using, but I was using, so I rebuilt like in the previous version of DLUX, which was just using Angular. I used D3.js and just consumed the northbound APIs. So that should be totally possible as well. But there's other libraries which like make D3.js easier. So, but I'm like not that good with D3, so I'm gonna shove that off to him, I hope.
I was just interested in knowing going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think he has a plan to be able to, so you can like select portions of the network to view, like in the futures, but it also relies a lot on how you can like do searching and stuff within the northbound APIs, because at the moment there's no paging, there is no search, there is no, you can't do those things at the moment. And then if you have like a controller and the controller has like 1,000 nodes, you're gonna get all of them back. That's a bit crappy. So I guess before we start getting those things, it would be really cool to have like, you can select this type of node or like this path or something and you get like the topology up for it. So, but it's a lot of future work, so. So more importantly, we need more people, at least if not developers, people with like ideas, because I mean, this is my day job, so I'm like doing this in my spare time. So trying to come up with like code and ideas is like a little bit like impossible at times. But we have like guys like Madhu and Brent coming up with cool stuff. And also a few other guys in the community starting to jump in, like the folk sitting there. So by that, I want to say thanks for coming. And if you have questions, just fire off.
Is this going to replace Horizon, or is it going to
So just to get a thing clear, like Horizon is built on Django for making dashboards. Whilst if you look inside of the Horizon folder, there is a folder called the Openstack dashboard, which is actually the dashboard implementation, which is kind of like DLUX. Yeah, we're thinking of going that way, so you can actually take DLUX and plug it into the OpenStack, kind of like. So there's a concept called the undercloud within OpenStack, which is kind of like the whole thing sitting beneath your OpenStack installation, which is running all the services. So you can take like DLUX and plug it in there, or plug it in, because it's all the same kind of thing. So, but if you're going to do the OpenStack dashboard with DLUX, you need to have Keystone. Because if not, it's like the controller uses basic authentication. So what we're doing at the moment is we're authenticating once and we're using the JSession cookies and putting that into there. So it's a pretty nasty way of doing it. Whilst if we use Keystone, we can just use OpenStack Keystone authentication plugin. And that'll have like all the handling for all the different things out of the box. So, yeah.
Is it worth showing everyone the wiki page that describes how they get involved?
Oh, yeah, that's a bad thing by me because the current wiki page is kind of screwed. So
Okay, the other day.
there is so we haven't been able to submit the code back to git.opendaylight.org yet because of licensing stuff. Since OpenDaylight is purely EPL, and you are not allowed to submit new projects using other licenses at the moment. So we have a thing with the TSC and the board coming up to be allowed to use Apache licenses for new stuff. Since we're wanting, like if you make stuff in DLUX and you want to push that back into Horizon again, is kind of screwed. But if you're wanting to take stuff from the Horizon stuff or the OpenStack dashboard and take that code into DLUX, it's okay. So it's like a bad thing. So hopefully that happens, I think, next week. And then there is going to be a board meeting after that. Other questions? Yeah.
So OpenStack has multi-tenancy, right?
Yeah.
How do you plan to split? Because rather than OpenDaylight, I think it doesn't really have the context.
Yeah, so the different dashboards in OpenStack can have like tenant supporting mode, or it can have like a not. So it set like supports tenants or something equals true or false. And by that, you'll get like tenant support. So at the moment, we'll probably just run in flat mode.
So this is going to be an active management.
Yeah, at the moment. That's the same thing as the current UI, though. So until it happens that, I think the container stuff was going to use for tenants, but it was, I think, deemed not scalable or something. So once that happens, we'll be able to use like, hopefully Keystone and like some tenant stuff within ODL. Any other questions or? Well, okay. It is Horizon, so it's building, I'd call it DLUX Horizon since this is like Horizon-based implementation of the whole UI. So there is a README here, which you can go and get like instructions for how to get started and all that. And I'm hoping for like 2 weeks or something, we'll have it up on just the ODL JIT instead and get like CI and stuff going. Because at the moment there is no way to test it. There is like, I can set up my own thing though, but I don't know. It's not right compared to the other projects.
Any point in the future you're going to connect this back to Horizon?
I don't think that it would be more like, so there is a thing called Tusker UI, which is made by Red Hat. So I think it's going to be more like that in that case, like a thing you can snap into the UI. I don't think the OpenStack team wants to have ODL stuff inside of their repository.
I mean, it's acceptable because they're already allowing panels per vendor. So we can't just take it on our own.
Yeah, well, I mean, we can try to ask the guys in the Horizon team. So, but at the moment, I'm just keeping it separate. Another other cool thing also with like the Horizon stuff is like making a new dashboard is like extremely simple. It's like a few files and you got like a new dashboard going. They're gonna change it as well, so there is gonna be support for having more than just a few dashboards, because at the moment if you have like 10 dashboards, you're kind of like screwed with the menu stuff. It's gonna be like a zillion long UI. The menu.
Is there a plan to actually avoid what's happening in OpenStack with Horizon where you have too many dashboards and too many sections that are dedicated for a lot of the users when you have everything turned on, it gets crazy.
I know that, so in HP we actually have like a collapsible menu. So when you click on like the project, it collapses the whole menu. But I think they're working on like a navigation enhancement BP. So once that happens in OpenStack, we'll have the same thing in DLUX because that's kind of like the base code. So we'll have like all the goodies that they do, like UI-wise, into DLUX as well.
Any of this going to replace the default networking and also get your code
In the controller UI, you mean, or?
in Horizon? You already
Oh, well, so, I mean, the networking panel more in Horizon at the moment is neutron-based. So I don't think we'll be able to do that because that's like a multi-tenant stuff and all that. So, but if it happens that they're kicking neutron out the door, which is unlikely, I think, I think we're just going to keep our UI like it is at the moment. But if it happens, it's going to happen though. So.
So in the past, whenever there's like something, I mean, this is open source, but there are like some vendor panels who wanted to change the code vendor panel.
Yeah.
Deals over there didn't allow it. They just added it. I mean, they're on the path of adding one panel.
Yeah, that's the problem, that we're getting too many panels. The funny thing is, so the navigational bit of like Horizon is like on the side, and I think when you have too many panels, it just screws up. So that's why we have like the sliding menu inside of HP for our public cloud thing. You actually have like, so you have the projects, networks, and all that. When you click on one of them, it collapses all the others. So it's a little bit better though. So that's it. No more questions. So, final thing though, we have, somebody mentioned Trello. That's the Trello page for the ODL client, which is like Python based. So we're hoping to get the Neutron guys to use that as well, instead of using the standard requests thing, which is used at the moment. And there's one for DLUX as well. So if you want to get on the list, just give me a ping on like email or IRC or something. I'll just add you to the thing.
What's your IC handle?
OpenDaylight-DLUX, I think, on Freenode. I think there is a no, I didn't put that together. I was making a wiki page with like an overview of all the IRC channels. I think. Any other questions or? Oh, okay then. DLUX, it's basically a UI which is decoupled from the main controller. So if you wonder why we did that, there is this little thing. So it all looks nice when you're looking at it in like the browser, but once you actually start looking under what it's using, it's a bit terrible. So this is the JSON which is used to write out the subnets, I think, if I remember correctly, in the current UI. And this is actually what it's like in the northbound one. Madhu, which came up with the name, was like, because we had a previous name which was called VUX, and it was pretty tragical because it was like, it means like old man or old guy in French. So that was pretty embarrassing when we came to the TSC meeting. So anyways, the thing we're wanting to do is kind of like to do the same thing which they were doing in Openstack, to try to just don't do any custom data thing within the controller and just use the northbound APIs. So basically keep the controller having all the smarts with all the data and just having like a stupid stateless UI. And if you need to do like any custom JSON thing from multiple API calls, you can do it like in the UI app instead. And the motivation for this is, for example, if you have a cluster and you want to do like a graphing thing for all of the different controllers in the cluster, you can have like the dashboard do all the API calls instead of having the controller do it. So the story so far is we started with AngularJS, if you're familiar with that. It's a JavaScript library for making single-page apps by Google. And I mean, if you look at the topology ones or some other ones of it, it's like even worse. So they're actually defining all the tables and everything with the JSON that the UI uses. So me and some other guys like Madhu wanted to try to like rip out the UI from the existing one and like decouple it. Like if you know OpenStack, it has like a stateless UI, which just consumes all the different API services. So the name was pretty funky. It was I think it was Dave Tucker or from HP or. This is like the presentation about the DLUX thing or the project. I'm Endre Karlson from HP Cloud Services. So DLUX is like, call it like a hobby project for me at the moment. So there is let's see if this thing does work. So what is